My name is Nicole Moore and Scribner. I'm a volunteer with the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center. Today is Thursday, November 13th, 2025, and today I have the honor of interviewing Donald Houde. Do you go by Donald or Don?
Both are fine.
Okay. And we are conducting this interview at Donald's home in Biddeford. So again, thank you for agreeing to do this interview. And I usually like to start these by starting at the beginning and asking you where and what year were you born?
I was born 1954 in Biddeford, Maine, and at on Poole Street.
Notre Dame?
Yeah, Notre Dame. Yes.
Notre Dame
Yeah,
Hospital.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was a little early. I was premature, so they kept me there for 3 weeks or to fatten me up a little bit, and henceforth the trilogy started.
The trilogy.
Yes, meaning the repercussions of being a premature child, health issues, the liability it causes to family, and it just adds another angle to what occurs when health is not at its apex. And so that was my beginning. I was very sickly, and it's been troublesome, but possibly it's conditioned me to deal with things that I have today. Who knows? Maybe that's just the way it rolls.
Huh. Now, can you tell me about how your family, starting with your father's side, how your family ended up being in Biddeford in the first place?
My grandfather migrated from Canada to Biddeford, and so my father was I believe that would make him the second generation here, and they lived in Biddeford. He worked in the mills, and my aunts, they did go to Biddeford High School. They did graduate. My father went to the 8th grade, and then he begged his parents to join the military, the Marine Corps, because it was during the time of the Second World War. And he hitchhiked to Augusta to sign up as a Marine, but he was only 16 years old. So the recruiting sergeant, brought him back home and says, "We can't take him. He's too young. You'd have to sign off." And of course, my grandmother didn't want to sign off, but he begged her, and they eventually did. And he joined the Marine Corps. And so that's the beginning of my father's trilogy in regards to living in Biddeford, and obviously he made it back. He was a seagoing Marine, referred to as a seagoing bellhop because of their uniforms. The Marine uniforms are very colorful. And the ship that he was on was destroyed in the Battle of Savo in the well, let me see, where would that be? That would be in the South Pacific. And he survived that, made it out of the military with a Purple Heart. He met my mother. He was interested in actually staying in the military because he liked it an awful lot. He went in, he was awfully thin. When he got out, he weighed 200 pounds, so he was eating, and he was really happy about that. But he liked the discipline, and he liked the culture. But my mother told him, "Nope, you're not going to do that. If we're going to get together, we're going to, raise a family and all that stuff, and do it that way." So he got an honorable discharge. And they traveled to Hartford, Connecticut, and he worked for my great uncle in the Sherman Transfer Company, in a construction company. And he did that for a year, but that wasn't his cup of tea. So he came back to Biddeford, went to school in Lewiston to the Barber College and got his certificate to be a barber, and he really enjoyed the work. It was clean, he liked the environment. And on the other side of the coin, my mother, she she grew up in Sanford. Her mother died at a young age. Her father was not a very good person. So she ended up in Lewiston, but she did all right for herself. She was a good-looking woman. She competed in pageants. She was Miss Greater Lewiston at the time. She ended up working at as a hostess for. She worked at the Poland Spring resort, and then she eventually went to hairdressing school, and she worked for a lady in Old Orchard Beach, Mrs. La Rochelle, and she did very well there, and that's where she met my father, and he courted her for a couple of weeks and was determined to marry her, so he made an offer, and she laughed at him, and but eventually she gave in, and they started their journey together. And they were very hardworking. They were looked up to by many people. They carried themselves very well. My father did a lot of stuff in regards to organizing. He was the president of the PTA at St. Andrews. He was the president of the Barbers Association in the state of Maine. Yeah. He was progressive in his work. So he did some pretty cool things. He didn't just sit by, you know. So as a little one, you get to witness that, and that gives you the not only the DNA, but also the role models that you look up to be able to extend yourself and try to duplicate some of the stuff the folks did, you know.
Yeah. So I don't think I asked you what are their names?
Paul Houde is my father, and Jeanette Houde is my mother.
Uh-huh.
You know? And yes, they're both deceased, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But they, my father died in his early 90s, and my mother, she was in the mid 80s. I think it was 86, 87.
Uh-huh.
So they had longevity on their side, and we tried to honor their wishes the best we could as far as turning their house into a nursing home and taking their assets and making them as comfortable as possible. So my sister and I did a lot of good work on their behalf, and but so it was okay, you know, because that's what you do.
So I'm gonna dial back a little bit. So first of all, you said that your grandfather came from Canada. Do you know where in Canada?
No, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I could do a little research on that to see if I could give you that information so you could fill out the blanks, and if you want.
But you didn't keep in contact with the family in Canada then?
No. All of the family that I knew was in Biddeford. He had a brother that lived in Biddeford, and his son Conrad. Actually, he's coming in for a haircut Friday, so we keep in touch, that type of thing. And on my mother's side, there was nobody.
So tell me about what it was like growing up. What are some of your childhood memories?
Well, the most prominent one was being sickly. That was really, it was terrifying. I spent a lot of time being very, very sick. So it was miserable, you know. There was nothing good about it. The positive side of it is the amount of love that I received, the support that way. The emotional support was really strong. I did have good doctoring, but it was just one of those things you had to overcome. And my biggest Achilles heel was the the acute allergies that I had. I was allergic to animals, house dust, cold germs. That was a biggie. That was really tough. Conifer trees, mold, and when you're premature, what happens is that your lungs develop last. So I've had lung issues with that complication. So it made it very, very difficult. So psychologically speaking, you spend a lot of time home. I learned how to make pudding to compensate for my misery, give myself a little reward, but in doing so, I put on weight. So then when you go out, kids pick on you because you're a fatso. So I had to learn to deal with how mean kids can be. And boys would physically pick on you and try to hurt you, you know. So it wasn't easy. But on the other side of the coin, I wanted to do things. I wanted to participate, and it didn't make any difference if I was good or bad. I didn't care. I just wanted to do things, and so I did. I competed, and there's this little girl, Rosie Dubois, little teeny thing, skinny as a stick, little sundress, no shoes. And when we were kids, you would all line up, and the best two kids would pick from the line to make teams. And I was last with Rosie all the time. And Rosie would get picked ahead of me almost all the time, and I would get picked last. But one day, I got picked ahead of Rosie. Ooh, boy, I'll tell you, I felt really special. But it was, but the good thing about growing up in that time is that the yards were open. Kids would go from one yard to the other. We would play hide and go seek. We'd play all sorts of games. There were big gardens. I used to go next door to Monsieur Bourdieu with 10 or 15 cents, and I'd come back with a whole bag full of vegetables. So, you know, that was really nice. And eventually I had allergy shots, and I needed to reintroduce animals into my life, so I did get a cat, and I really loved my cat, and I got better. And by the time I got into high school, I actually was well. And it's really kind of interesting when you're on the downside of the seesaw, and all of a sudden you're on the upside. It's a whole new experience, and I hadn't had any. Let me see. Any proper experience coming in with all of this wealth of mental and physical health that I think I misused it. And I didn't think I was a bad person, but I could have been more humble, you know. And there are words for guys like me, but I'm not going to say it. So anyway, it was a learning curve, and but childhood in general was tough basic training. You know, it wasn't easy. But you know, I had the personality to deal with it, and I did. You know.
So where did you grow up, and what were the neighborhoods like?
Well, Raymond Street, a part of downtown Biddeford. I guess you would call it the suburbs. I'm not exactly sure, but you know, you have yards. You know, one yard after another with a house on it. It's between Hill Street and Granite Street, that area. So it was really cool. We had some woods, we had some brooks, we had skating at St. Louis Field. There were fields where circuses would come in and they'd set up. So it was actually a pretty cool place to grow up. That worked out fine. I went to St. Andrew's School. I went there for 5 years, including kindergarten. I was a fourth grade dropout. I had to repeat the fourth grade. And so I went to public school at the time, which I thought was a prison, but it was a blessing. The teacher there, Mrs. Meserve, was a fabulous teacher, and she told my mother that she would make sure that I caught up, and I did. So that was my first experience academically that I could actually compete with other kids. Prior to that, and I was in hell. I went to school in fear, needed glasses. I couldn't see the board. I was a fatso, so they put you out back. And I wasn't well health-wise. Missed a lot of school, and when I was there, I wasn't well. So you have all of this stuff plus the anxiety, and they were very strict. So it wasn't good at all. So going to public school was really cool, really good. Then I went to Kennedy. That was the first year the school was open, and it was in the sixth grade. I joined the fife and drum corps, and I've been played the fife, and I could play that son of a gun. I played music 15 years, well, up to my senior year, then an additional 13 years in the Pancho band, but I had played with them for 15 years. And so that was a nice thing to do. And actually, I'm looking to buy a saxophone now. I want to see if I can work on my hand dexterity and my wind. I'm narrowing it down. There's a lot to know when you buy a musical instrument.
A little bit earlier, before we started recording, you were starting to tell me something about the apartment building where you lived for a while.
Well, that was my father.
Oh, okay.
Prior to he meeting my mother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That was the the House of International House of Nations, so to speak. Yeah, the French family was on the third floor, which was my father's parents' home. Second floor was the Irish family, and the bottom floor was the Jewish family. And my grandmother would always get in trouble with the Jewish mother because she would feed the kids chocolate cake, and of course chocolate cake had lard in it, and the Jews don't eat lard. So she'd tell my grandmother, "Don't feed my kid," and she didn't understand English all that well. So, but they got along. It was all based on love. There was no animosity or anything like that. So
with a French background, what language was spoken at home?
There was French, but my brother, being the oldest of three, he had a better command of it, and my sister, being in the middle, she did too. And I was towards the tail end, so there were 4 years in between all of us. So what happened is that the French language was not spoke as much, and so at one time my understanding of French was reasonable, and I could speak it a little bit. But the few times recently that I've gone to French-speaking Canada, I usually get a high eyebrows, like, what the hell are you saying, And my wife gives me the big eye too. Says, "Stop it." So I don't have command of the language anymore, or to whatever level I did have it. Often thought it would be nice to study again. I have a lot of interest, and so I'm not bored. It's one of the things that I don't understand when somebody says I have nothing to do on board. It's like, you kidding me? There's the whole universe to discover and try things and learn and eat and smell. It's like, plenty to do.
Speaking about, like eating and whatever, did you have any traditions or cultural traditions that you can remember growing up with?
Oh yeah, my mother she was a very good cook. She was a good cook economically. She would buy the less expensive cuts of pork, like a hip and beef, and she would brown them, then roast them in a large casserole with the vegetables and stuff like that. And then we would take that meat after having the big dinner, and we would make sandwiches throughout the course of the week. And she was a good cook. She knew how to do something well, but use economy. But there were sauces, and no, it was pretty good stuff. So actually, I have, when my mom passed away, the nieces made a cookbook based on her recipes. And so I do have that someplace here. But some of the things that she does, I picked up, though Bonnie, my sister, was the principal as to who was being taught these things. But for whatever reason, through osmosis of big ears, I picked up on it, and I've learned. And I'm curious about foods. Historically, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to take a cookbook and read it, because I'm interested in formulas. I'm interested in how things work together and stuff like that. But my wife is the recipe cook, and she cooks very well. I'm the refrigerator junk cook. I'll open the refrigerator door, I'll see what's in there, and I'll make something. So the good thing about it, you don't have leftovers, right?
Mm-hmm. So, do you have any memories of what it was like growing up with your brother and your sister, what it was like at home?
Yeah, there was, like, my brother was 8 years older, so I really didn't, we were in two different universes. Like, he went to St. Louis, and here he is playing football, and he brings his buddies over the house, and it's all these big guys. And here I am, probably 8 years old, maybe. And, in my pajamas, just a little guy, Actually, I still remember who those people were. And even to this day, sometimes you bump into him and you talk. Though he was a big influence in my life, he served two terms in Vietnam, and he was in the Tet Offensive. And when he came back home, and we were at the end of his senior year, and I sat in his car, he came to pick me up, and I asked my brother if I should enlist. And it was probably only a couple of minutes, but it was the longest 2 minutes I've ever experienced. The cab of his car was dead silent, and he said in a real low voice now. So that was a real change, because my grandfather served in the First World War. He was an interpreter in France. My father, like I said before, has a Purple Heart recipient in the Second World War. My brother, 2 terms in Vietnam in the Tet Offensive. So here I am. These are all role models. Should you be serving your country? And it's a consideration. But because of the political turmoil and the lack of respect that America had for the servicemen, he said no, so I didn't go. And he influenced my life throughout, but that left a lot of scars in him to this day. A lot of men got wasted psychologically. It's just a shame how we treat our warriors. And my sister, let me see. Because of my illness, a lot of times I couldn't leave the yard. So I'd have to play with whoever was there, and sometimes I'd end up playing with my sister. But there wasn't really that much going on, because again, gender difference, 4 years. Though I wasn't lonely by any means. Have an imagination, I used it, and I had plenty of fun. If I'm not doing it on the outside world, I'm doing it on the inside world, Though as an adult, I used to take my sister out shopping when it was her birthday, and I'd buy her something, or I'd take my mother out, So I appreciated the effort that they put into making me felt welcome in the family. So I tried to reciprocate it when there were special opportunities, that type of thing.
A couple of interesting things connected to some stuff that you mentioned is, so in preparation for these interviews, I have access to something called newspaperarchives.com so that I can research newspaper articles, particularly with the Biddeford Saco Journal. First of all, your father and mother are all over the place.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got all kinds of pictures of them. They were so active in the community, as you had mentioned. And then an interesting story I saw about your brother when he was in Vietnam is that he had a barbershop like 18 miles from Saigon.
Right.
And they had done an article about that. And then on a different note, and it's interesting that you said something about your sister and her birthday. One of the things that people may not realize is that the newspaper back in the day was like the social media of today. And so there's an article about your sister's 12th birthday party and who was there, I think what games you were playing and stuff like that was actually in the newspaper. Back then they'd actually put in, who's gone to the hospital. I think this was pre, HIPAA and privacy, but I always get amazed whenever I see those kinds of articles in the newspaper, and I don't think that, well, we talk a lot about, this is on Facebook and this is on these other social media. Well, in days past, that's what the newspaper was used for, and they would write stories about that stuff. Going back to that transition, I'm interested in that transition from when you had all those health issues which impacted the activities, the typical activities that kids are involved in, and then coming out on the other side, because, what I saw is, Little League and, junior high basketball. Your team went through a streak where it was undefeated, and then, of course, talk about high school football.
Mm-hmm.
So what was sports like in this community, and how did you fit into that picture?
Well, I can remember going to St. Louis Field and trying to watch my brother play football, and it wasn't discovered that I needed glasses, so all I saw was blue patches moving around on the field. And there were bleachers on either side of the field, and also Waterhouse Field on a Friday night had bleachers on both sides, and they were full. So you had the impact of community really, really getting into it. So it pulls you into that fold. When I played junior high sports, I did better with the indoor sports. I wasn't as sickly because I was still getting shots. But when we played football in the dust and the mold, terrible, absolutely terrible. I really, really suffered. And that wasn't the thing. And one thing about athletics, I was consistently not good at anything. But it didn't make any difference. To me, it's not a matter of how good you are about something, but it's the will to wanting to participate in something. Just like the idea of everybody wanting to go to the football game and to participate in the process of seeing the experience. I mean, I tried all sorts of things in high school. Was I good at them? Not necessarily. But did I care? No, because I wanted to try. And I think probably if I had a gene that I could pass down to anybody that was free to give, it would be the idea of having an open mind to try things. What happens through the experience of trying things is that even if you're not successful, you learn something. And as you learn something, these bits of information start coloring the coloring book, the page. It starts defining you, and all of a sudden, hey, that's you got something going on there. It's not that you're fantastic or you're rich or you're this, but you've participated in life, and I think that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to participate, So
Well, you must have gotten some recognition that you were making a contribution, because I saw that you were one of the tri-captains.
yeah. Matter
In
of
the
fact,
football team.
I had the guys over yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I still terrorize them. They hate me.
Now, I saw that because of course, Biddeford High in football, especially back then, I mean, that
It was
was
a big
like,
deal. Yeah,
that was like the pinnacle.
Right,
It was
right.
It was who we were. And I saw that in your senior year, there was something pretty significant that kind of happened with all of the coaches.
yeah. The coaches they had to release 2 coaches from the staff because I believe the Mayor Bushy wanted to reduce the budget, and the coach wouldn't do it, which I thought was really selfish on his part. And he's been told over and over again that you effed up, you let us down, and he did, But hey, we all make mistakes.
But that must have taken something to still rally your fellow teammates when all the coaches had resigned.
Yeah, well, you still have the Biddeford DNA going strong, so it's going to take a lot more than a few rails off the track to be thrown. And we were competitive that year, but we had Coach Simpson, and first thing he told us, he says, "Don't expect much, boys. I'm just here to get you through," and that was it. And intellectually, he was smart. He was the athletic director for BC, or a former. So he had the intelligence. He wasn't committed to our cause, But again, it's a learning lesson, and we participated. And I still have my relationships with my friends. And getting back when I was in junior high, they had a big box of helmets. And all the kids get their equipment, and what they thought of me as an athlete, which was probably appropriate, I got a leather helmet, okay? Not a suspension helmet, as they were called, plastic with a suspension device on the inside. And that's what I had. I had a leather helmet, And so I worked my way up. But like I said, I wasn't really good at sports, but I participated. Didn't care about how bad I was. I just kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. So basically, I worked myself to a position where I received whatever. But it was just based on wanting to participate and working hard. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also saw that you were elected the president of your class your senior year.
Yeah. Let me see. I forgot who. I think it was Harvey Paul that was the president, and he resigned right after the football season. And after football, I didn't have anything to do, so I says, "What the hell? Let's give it a shot." But that had a lot to do with. Well, I'll back up a little bit. My junior year, Ronnie Marchand won the Fitzpatrick Trophy, and he was walking down the hallway, and literally he was about 6 inches off the floor, just floating by. And I told who I was. I was in the office, leaning against the door, talking to maybe Brother Richard. And I says, I would never do that. Be that way. Well, guess what? You get elected to be, or voted to be, the team one of the team captains, and guess what? Your head gets real big. So it's a human condition, it's just one of those things, and that carried on my whole senior year. I had a lot of confidence. I was self-centered, and I knew things had to be done, and we got things done. A lot of the girls on the committee didn't like it. They complained, but it didn't bother me because it was more about the project being done versus whether you're popular or not. Because at that time, that's probably the biggest thing I learned about the high school experience. I wanted to be part of something because it builds up your self-esteem. But then you get to realize that that's all good and well, but the most important thing is yourself, how you feel about yourself. And if you feel well about yourself, you really don't have to belong to things. Doesn't mean it's bad too, but it's not necessary for. So that was my big lesson, that I was okay by myself and I could determine what I was going to do from that point. We had the Bill Withers concert, which was a big thing. I went over to Thornton Academy to sell tickets for the concert. And here I am in the school and they say, don't you go to Biddeford? And I says, yeah. And he says, what are you doing here? I says, I'm selling tickets. And he says, you like going to a concert? I says, yeah, well, we're having a concert. I'm inviting you guys over. So I didn't have any fear of doing things. I compelled the interior line of the football team to join choir because I was also in the choir. I had a lead role in a play. Was I good? No, didn't make any difference. Again, I wanted to participate. I wanted to try things, And the guys, when they sang for the concerts, they got all stoked up. They got into it. They had fun. So I often said that was probably my biggest accomplishment in high school, getting the guys to join choir. Because of course guys don't do that, especially football guys. Well, tough shit, you're joining. All I had to do is threaten them, and they said okay. Not that I'd really do anything, but. So, had fun.
So then when it came time, high school days are almost behind you. What was the thought process as to what's next?
Well, let me see. I went to the University of Maine at Orono, spent a year there, had the opportunity to be thrown out of college by 2 professors and one doctor. I obviously had the wrong approach. My grade point average was good enough. I didn't have to leave, but the thing is, I didn't have focus. It's kind of like having a boat without a rudder. If you don't have a game plan, it's just not good. And I needed a mentor, somebody to grab me by the ruff of my neck and say, Donald, you got I think the first semester I had, or the first year, I think you needed a minimum of 22 credit hours, and I had 32. So I had way too many credit hours. Some of my skills weren't appropriate for college level work, so things that I needed to work on. And education isn't necessarily about grades, though plenty of people cheated to get grades, but it's having the skills necessary to move on. And everybody's different with their skill set. At Biddeford, I perfected short-term memory, and I did very well academically. I made the National Honor Society my junior year. They took me out my senior year. I was kind of like an experiment, but I did have good grades. But a lot of the stuff I was doing was short-term memory, so I could memorize it, spit it out, get A's, and move on. And it was college-level stuff, So, whatever. Though it wasn't the top tier. Some of the kids in school, God, they were really, really smart. Like Johnny Haynes, God, Johnny was just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, he would be an interesting person to interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we reconnected a couple of years ago when we organized our 50th
I like Johnny.
reunion. Yep.
We had some nice encounters. He was a real nice guy. He introduced me to college lectures. And he says, hey, you want to come to a lecture with me? I said, sure. So we go to the University of Maine and sit down and catch a lecture. I recently wanted to catch one at UNE, but the finance guy was doing his thing over the computer, and so I had to cancel that lecture.
So then so you were at UMaine RNO for a year, and then what was your decision process of what to do after that?
Well, I felt guilty about spending $3,000 a year and not really being focused on what I needed to do. So my father suggested, he says, why don't you go to beauty culture school? I need somebody in the business to do this type of work, the perms, the colors, and stuff like that. Because when you go to barbering school, you get that, but they don't emphasize it. You really, if you want somebody to do that work, you should go to a cosmetology school. So I went to Lewiston. I went to the Bernard School of Beauty Culture, which was a real scream. I was an extreme oddity in that environment. I didn't fit, but you know how it goes with Donald, doesn't care. Let's experience it, see what it's like. And at the end of the school year, I was teaching the academic stuff because it really isn't all that hard. After going to school at RNO, the academic stuff, I don't know, 3 months is more than enough. You don't need 9 months. But it was okay.
So why were you an oddity at Bernard School?
It's just it's a different world. It's a very, very female world. And that was just odd. It was odd for a guy like me to be in that environment. It's just that it is. It's just a different world. I don't know how better to explain it.
Mm-hmm. So when you were going to school there were how people reacted to you was.
No, it was fine. No.
Oh, it was fine.
Oh yeah, no, I got along with people.
Uh-huh.
No, I didn't have a problem. No.
So you did get through that course of study?
Oh yeah.
With them?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I still am. I'm still a licensed cosmetologist. I still keep my license.
So you went from going to school there, and how long is it? A 1-year program?
It's hours. You got to put in 1,500 hours. No, 15 or 1,800. I don't quite remember, but if you put in 40 hours a week times 9 months, you get in your hours.
Okay. And so you went from there to working at your father's
Yeah, with my
place?
father, right.
Uh-huh. So your father had that business for a long time.
Oh, sure. Yep. Let me see. Well, I'm guessing maybe 4 years after the war, he started his own shop. So if he got out of the military in 45, I'm assuming licensing, traveling, trying different things. Probably by 1950, he opened up his shop. And it was a classic barbershop. But the day came that long hair was coming in, and barbers didn't know how to cut long hair. And so my mother told my father, my mother's a hairdresser. She told my father, Paul, if you don't go back to school, we're going to starve. You got to learn how to do it. So he hooked up with a franchise, Roffler, and that was really, really, really good. Even to this day, I look at the work that they do, and I'm a Roffler hairstylist, and I look at them and says, holy Jesus, these guys are so freaking good. But that's a whole different conversation. But anyway, brought in the good stuff. We learned the disciplines and the training and stuff like that. And my brother went to barber school in Lewiston, went to Vietnam, and he ended up in Miami. He studied under a guy named Joe Carlos, and he was an international hair designer. Norman worked in his colleges, worked in his shops, doing fine. My father's business was prospering, so he came up from Miami. So you have all this dynamic skill going on. And let me back up. To do any of this well, your basic skills have to be good. So their basic skills were solid, and their skills that, that they learned from their different disciplines improved what they had to offer to the public. Then I come in and I bring in the chemical work to the shop. So now the shop is more balanced. And we used to be booked 3 weeks solid. And it was by appointment. And our prices were, I don't know, 2 to 3 times higher than any classic barbershop. And we were hot. I'll tell you, it was really quite the thing. The beautiful work that came out of that place. It was really a lot of fun. So that was cool. And my brother and I, we lived an aggressive lifestyle. We had a lot of fun. But my father was a Marine. And you know what? You listen to your dad. I may have looked like that. I came out of the Colombian cartel, but I listened to Dad. You come to work, you put in your time, you do your work, that type of thing. So, no, it was good years.
Yeah, because as a profession, as an outsider, when you stop and think about it, like you said, you think of the classic barber shop. And then I know that I interviewed another person who had been a barber all his life, and he's like, he was not too happy when the Beatles got popular.
Right.
But so you've got, and I would imagine that during that time, you still have your clientele of, the younger generation's parents are still coming to the traditional barbershop. But then you've got this whole generation that, you've got the 60s and 70s with, with the long hippie look.
You know what happened, though, is that the money pushed out the classic customer. The customer that wants the high and tight every 2 weeks, there were fewer and fewer. If you had some, they were there for 2 reasons, because they made a relationship with the person, and the price didn't bother them.
Mm-hmm.
Our time became more valuable, supply and demand. So that vanished. We were doing hair designing. We were hair stylists. We went beyond just being barbers. There's nothing wrong with being a barber. It's just that we evolved. And like I was talking to my brother not too long ago, because he lives in Las Vegas, and he says, I didn't want to go back to school, do all this bullshit. I says, Norman, the cuts that you learned when you were in Miami, I mean, I understand what he does, but there's still some cuts today. I cannot get it as nice as he can do. I mean, he was just a master at it. And I said, just advertise, you sell the Miami look. That's all. Because once you get a client base and people see it, it becomes a trend, and you become the ideal, So, but he didn't follow through on that, because, like anything else, there's a lot of BS you have to go through. But he was really talented.
And is there, especially, if you're thinking about Biddeford in the 80s, 90s, was there a market for that?
We were booked solid for 3 weeks over. We started in the 70s, we were booked 3 weeks. Now, what happened in the market is that trends started changing, and wages became inadequate. Having an employer-employee relationship wasn't working anymore, because as high as our wages were, they became flat and they needed to increase. And it's the economics thing going on. We had a real sweet spot. Then we became, though we were still really good, things changed in the marketplace. There were more salons doing different things. Designs were changing. So you change your model, your role model. And when I bought the business from my father, we went from an employer-employee relationship to a booth rental. And it's not that I wanted to do that, is that I couldn't find the inventory. I couldn't sell the idea anymore. People wanted to be their own boss. The difference with that is, if I'm your boss, I want you to work 40 hours a week. I will provide you an income. I will build up your income and your skill set so you can rise. That's the old model. The new model is I want to come in when I want to come in. If I want to work 20 hours a week, that's what I'll do. I'll maximize that 20 hours a week, and then I get to do what I want to do, take care of my family, rear my children, which are all great ideas. But the thing is, it changes the, truly, you don't become a professional. You become a part-time skilled person versus the other way. We're trying to rise you to develop the best possible professional you can be. Totally different mindset. What makes you a better stylist? Being it on your own or having a good employer? It's having a good employer because you go to the shows. They pay for your hotel. You travel. You see things. You get put into clinic. You train. You're looking for your future to get better.
Mm-hmm.
The other way, you can't tell them what to do. And so what they do, they don't do. And so henceforth, you don't expand mentally, physically, and financially.
Mm-hmm.
But it's happened all over the place. What's the biggest problem with people that own businesses? Can't find help.
Mm-hmm. Now, a couple of things come to mind when I think about this particular profession. First of all, what is your recollection of how people transition from, there was a day where women would not go into a barbershop and guys would not be caught dead at a beauty salon. So how did that transition happen from your perspective?
Unisex.
Mm-hmm.
A salon that specialized in haircuts that were androgynous for men and female. You adapt it to either one. But if you look at the designs of the 60s and the 70s, you see a lot of that. You see a lot of guys with longer hair, with shags, with layered tops, and a lot of designs for the ladies. Shags were very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Perms are very popular. Did a lot of spiral perms came in later, but we did a lot of permanent waves. Big hair, big expressions, that type of thing.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think about, and something you said that prompted a thought for me is, so you did helped us to understand like the technical side of things, but so talk to me about the personal connection that happens when people go to one of your professionals. What was that like? What were you trying to create?
Well, it's you have to have a caring heart. If somebody's across the street and they're having a hard time, you go over and you open the door and you help them cross the street. Okay? If somebody is hurting and it's Christmas Eve and they don't have stockings on their feet, you bring them in the shop, you make them a cup of tea, and there's nobody there, and you embrace them, you hold them, you spend time. You got to care about people. You just got to care. If you don't have the heart to care, you can do anything you want, but I don't think you'll ever get what you need. Because when we do things, we're seeking something that we want to get for ourselves. And what you get out of what you do starts with you giving what you have of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And once you understand that and you do that, people can feel it, that you do care.
Mm-hmm.
It's an intangible thing. It's a human thing. It's kind of like a gift, And we all have it. We all have it.
So without sharing, confidential or specific information, are there any stories that come to mind, either, that your father has shared in terms of some of the stories and connections he's made with some of his the people that came to him, or I mean, you were in the business for a long time too. You got
Yeah.
to know a lot of people, hear a lot of their. I know myself when I go, you can't help but you're there for quite a period of time, so you're talking about what's going on and what are some of the things that come to mind in terms of what people have shared with you.
Well, in having conversations with a client, I try to make the conversation pertinent to them and not about me. So, whatever they were into, you had to use your recall and try to engage what their experience is. And in doing so, you see them lighting up, and you actually can have true communication. As far as being able to share anything specifically, no. When I came home from work, I would leave work at work, and I wouldn't bring it home. And as far as the interpersonal relationships I have with people, even if I had to tell you something, because my life was on the line, for whatever reason, I don't have that recall to tell you, so I guess I'd have to perish. And I'm not skirting the situation. It's just the truth.
Yeah.
Now,
do you recall like some of the major things that happened in town and the impact that it might have had on the businesses? Like, for example, well, this piece probably would have impacted more like your father, I would guess, like when the mills closed. Did that cause concern as to whether the business would continue to survive?
Yeah, there's always been ebb and flow in regards to economies, recessions, political, but closing, no, never had those thoughts. Maybe I wasn't smart enough to read the tea leaves, that maybe it was going to happen, but I never felt that. Well, let me see. The only time that I can tell you that I think that the business was not going to be to my satisfaction is the latter years of my life, where it was so hard to find qualified hairstylists. So the game plan is to make the business work for you, but unfortunately, I was working for the business. So instead of working 8, I was working 10. Instead of working 5 days a week, I was taking on more chores, because there's a lot of chores on the outside that you have to do to maintain a business. And I bought the building also, so I had that obligation. But no, there were some hard years, so you just do other things. I sold term life insurance for A.L. Williams for a while, wasn't successful at that. Worked for a marketing firm out of Portland. You see those infomercials? The best thing about that is that they teach you about human behavior. You get pretty good training. And so what happens is that when you understand that, you get to turn the table when it comes back to you. And it does. It happens all the time. People are tricked all the time. So again, you try different things. If you don't have enough income, but
because you've seen Biddeford go, especially because you've always been in the general downtown area. You've seen Biddeford go through some very different cycles.
Sure. Well, I guess I just don't have anything to add.
Is there anything about the profession or your line of work that you would say people have no idea, or what is something that people might be surprised to know about what it's like to be in this line of work?
I think the newbies are surprised of how fatiguing it is to stand behind a chair for 8 hours. Really, it's hard work.
Uh-huh.
And the creative aspect takes a lot of energy out of it. Then the technical aspect of doing the creative aspect takes a lot of so the illusion is that it's glamorous, but quite honestly, it's hard. It's hard on your body. When I was selling insurance, there was a disability policy, and it was rated from 1 to 4, and hairdressers were rated 4 as being in the worst possible category because of the chemicals and this and that, whatever. So it was pretty tough. And by the way, when it came to the chemicals, I never used American-based chemicals. The United States has the worst or the most lenient rules for allowing things to be put on human beings. The Europeans are far more stringent. They have like 356 chemicals that they will not use there on people, and over here we use them. So I never used American-made. Isn't that terrible?
Wow.
Over here it's all about making money. We don't care as much about people versus our counterparts in Europe. They do a much better job. As a matter of fact, to be a hairdresser in Europe, you can get a 2-year associate degree or a 4-year degree. And it's kind of like going to a liberal arts college. And I often thought that's what we should do here, because I feel during the course of my life, I certainly have a liberal arts education, but it was self-done. Whereas over there, it's at the get-go, and it makes your profession a professional. And that's the way I think it should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that you can get these chemicals at the drugstore, oh God, you wonder why people are sick when they get older, It really is terrible.
Wow, yeah. How long did you have your salon?
Let me see. I'm not very good with the numbers, but oh God, I don't know. 20-some years I bought the business.
And that's not even counting the time that you were working for your father?
No, it was better than 45 years.
Yeah, So, and then of course you had a major life event that occurred.
Oh yeah, I got married.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, well, if there was one particular thing that stood out in my life, that was probably the most life-changing, was hooking up with Debbi. And because we were boyfriend and girlfriend in high school for a year, and then we weren't. And then we hooked up 25 years later, and that was really something. Yeah, that was the biggest challenging event, because you had to change your mindset from being this wild stallion, and then all of a sudden being committed, and I love her dearly, but there's a psychological change that you have to make, and it was okay. I committed myself to her and Tyler, because it wasn't just her, it was Tyler, and yeah, that was something. It still is.
How old were you when you...
Oh, let me see. I don't know, 43, 44, something like that.
Okay. And how old was Tyler at the time?
Well, I first met Tyler the first time he was 4.
Uh-huh.
And I think we did it really slow, because she was really hurt from her first marriage. So she didn't want to run into things, And yeah, we just took our time. We each had our own apartment. Then eventually we moved in together. And but an interesting statement from her was on the first date that I had with her. She said, if we're going to get together, or however she presented it, she says, if you're not willing to either buy a house, build a house, or whatever, we can call it off right now. And I'm opening up the door to let her into my car. So she told me this, and I says, okay. And I did. I built this house. I was the general contractor to this house.
It is beautiful.
Yeah,
I haven't
thanks.
seen the whole thing yet, but from what I've seen, I'm sitting here admiring it here.
Yeah, not bad for a first house, huh? That was a big adventure. We went to Canada, spent time in Drummondville, tractor trailers, border, being shouted at by the border people, having big arguments. I was on site every day. I'd pick up material at Home Depot, bring it over here, talk to the contractors, look at the blueprints, solve problems, go back to the shop, work there. They'd come at night, give me what they need, go back to Home Depot. They'd pick the material. I'd go with my pickup truck. They'd load my truck, bring it here. And it was a 6-month project. Actually, I think I would have been good at being a project manager for building homes, because it was, you have the discipline of going to college and doing papers, and the first part of building a home is no more than making an argument for what you want to do. So we found the design of home. We had the designs drawn up. We had the blueprints drawn up. Then we give it to contractors. The bank wants to see 3 of everything: 3 plumbers, 3 electricians, 3 carpenters, 3 framers, 3 So you get all these, you find the people, you negotiate the contracts. And so we went to the bank and we told them we want to be the JC in building our house, so they give us the look. And he had a pile of paper like that, and he pushes it over to me. He says, no, I'm all done. Mine was like this here. Freaked him out. I don't know, 2 weeks later, they gave me the money. And built it in 6 months.
And it obviously paid off. It's beautiful, and it's your home.
And paid up. Yay!
That's a big thing too, for sure.
Yeah.
So did you ever think about living someplace other than Biddeford?
Let me see. Yes. I was going to say no, but yes. I bought some land in Conway. Not North Conway, but Conway. The Conways are all stuck together. And I was considering of building, because I just had finished paying off the land. So I had my down payment to build something. And while I was doing that, I hadn't met Debbi yet. Or there was a transition, so I wasn't sure what was going to go on. But when it came to the point that we made the commitment to build the house, I sold my land in Conway, because all hands on deck. If you're going to do this, you do it. You don't go halfway. So I did it. I sold my property, but if it wouldn't have been for her, there probably would have been a chance that I would have moved to the Conway area. Or at the very least build something and get rental income, because I used to go skiing. I bought a timeshare at the Samoset, and I bought it specifically to vacation, because it came to mind when you're self-employed and you work and you work and you work, you don't take any time off. So I said, I gotta do it. So I bought the timeshare. I used it in North Conway to go skiing, and so I went skiing every year for a week. Not a great skier. Didn't make any difference, right? You know the theme, right? But I had fun. I enjoyed it.
And did you travel much?
Yeah. Let me see. Well, going to Boston with friends, go see the Patriots or go see the Celtics or whatever, that type of thing. That was somewhat common. Going to Quebec City, that's always been a thrill. Um, had spent some time in Montreal. That's somebody that I was close to. And early on, my dad brought us to New York in a big fashion show, the international shows. And I got to be used as a model, very embarrassing. I was 14, we visited my brother in Miami, so I got to see some of that. Collins Avenue is fascinating if you've ever been in Miami. And then when I hooked up with Debbi, her parents were very generous, and we went to Cancun a few times that way. My brother went west. I've been to Vegas 3 times. Deb and I spent a nice vacation with friends in Arizona. Fabulous state. Did have a vacation early on Beverly Hills, which I got to realize that I wasn't that cool. I didn't like the way people lived out there. Their commitments were like water through a sieve. They, having multiple partners or trading in wives. It's terrible. Well, anyway, not my cup of tea. It's good. Like I said, as cool as I thought I wasn't. So let me see. Where else have we gone? We did some cruises. Bermuda was a nice cruise. Enjoyed that. So, yeah, I've seen a little bit of the. Oh, we went to Hawaii.
Yeah.
That's where I had my accident.
Yes. Do you care to share about that? That obviously is a major life event for you as well.
Yeah, Hawaii, the first 5.5 days was fabulous. I loved it.
What year was that, Don?
Well, let me see. If you can back up 4 years, then I'll tell you what year it is.
Okay.
Okay.
21.
I don't even know what year it is. It's 25, right? So
yes.
Yeah, 2021. Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound strange, but it's okay. It's okay.
Are you willing to share at least some of what happened?
Well, let me see. We went to lunch, and we were on the what side of the island are they referring to? Well, anyway, there's a lot of little towns and villages along the coast on the Big Island, and we found a nice little place to have lunch. Found a beer that I said, "Ooh, finally, this is the beer I want to drink. It tastes really good." And the wave was a little above my head, didn't seem enormous. I had one of these styrofoam boards, and I went forward with the wave, and it drove me to the bottom. And what happens there, it may look like sand, but a few inches of sand, then you have molten lava that is formed over, and it's smooth, and it crushed my spine in several places, and I realized it was underneath the water, and I said, well, telling myself, you got to get up. And I couldn't move. I couldn't. So started taking in water, and it's going to sound strange. It was all right. It didn't. I wasn't in any fear or anything like that. It was, and next thing you know, a couple of guys picked me up. They're pumping the water out of my lungs, and but the biggest take out of the whole thing, it's not about me. It's how it affects other people. And I put my wife through hell. I put my stepson through hell, and his girlfriend. It's just terrible, because it's they don't know what's going to go, and I'm okay with it. Though I probably wouldn't have been okay. I needed to show them that I could move. And I could move my big right toe initially, but after a couple of weeks, I had to show them that I could move. So I stood up and I guess I made a walking move, and that gave them enough impetus to put me in rehab versus a nursing home. Because if I would have gone in the nursing home, I'd probably still be there. You know, that means you're just laid up, and I would have sucked up all of the resources that we saved for our retirement, you know. That would have been terrible. But I managed to do well enough in the rehab. They give you 2 months, and I had a send off. When I left, they said they never seen this before. Everybody came out, and there was a line of people wishing me well, and I guess I made some impact on people. I didn't focus on the negative expression of being a crippled person. I counseled people because I know how hard it was for them to work with people like me over and over again. So I tried to be inspirational to them, and I guess that was unusual for them because my thoughts weren't on me, but they were on them. And again, getting back to what I did in my trade, that type of thing, you know.
So you were there for 2 months?
2 months.
And then came back here?
Yeah.
You were able to come back into your home?
Yeah. Not very well. I had a lot of help. A lot of kind people came in and worked with me, because what insurance allows you and what you really need are two different things. There was a lot of things physically I couldn't do, but I'm not going to get into it. But not some of the nicer things, I couldn't do it, you know. So I needed people to do it for me, you know.
Uh-huh.
Just think of a toddler. What can a toddler do for itself, right? Well, I'm a big toddler, you know. So I needed a lot of help, and.
Now, I also understand, because I have to say, you know, I was vaguely aware of your situation. And to further complicate things, from your perspective, I'd be interested. So what impact did COVID have? Because this was during the COVID epidemic as well.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I did end up catching COVID, and I had a urinary tract infection, and I went to Southern Maine Medical, and terrible experience, absolutely terrible. And it's obviously supposed to be terrible because of the terrible situations that the medical community was in. I mean, they had an overflow of people. They were overworked. It's, you know, God bless them for hanging in there. I don't care how bad you're doing the job, you're still hanging in there, you know. But it was terrible. It was a terrible experience, not only being sick, but just witnessing what's going on. You know, I think you've picked up by now, I pick up on things of what's going on, and it's like, whoa. You know, like, in the emergency room, I was in a blackened room with machines going off really, really loud in the room. I couldn't sit up. I was really, really sick. I still had my spinal cord injury to deal with, and the doctor was questioning me whether I thought I was sick or I should be there. And he was rude about it. "You sick? Are you really sick?" And I was like, "Jeez." I'm hanging on to dear life, you know. But you know, I think it was a week later I was out of the hospital.
And during that time, you know, it's hard for us to remember all of the ramifications that it meant during the COVID days, but could Debbi or Tyler come visit you?
No. My father-in-law died in the hospital, JP. You know, he had COVID, and it took him, you know. It took a lot of people, whether they believed it or not. It's kind of weird how that works, huh? Proof is not in the pudding.
Yeah, that was really an interesting time that we lived through, for sure. And especially when you were dealing with additional challenges.
Well, prior to that, I had told the girls that, we really should shut down, and they wouldn't want to do it. So I told them, well, this is my last day. I'm shutting down. And I called up my clients and I says, I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. And that Friday, the governor told us we had to shut down. So I was a little ahead of the curve there. Read the tea leaves, we'll survive without the money, but if you're dead, you're dead.
I bet that had a devastating impact on, small business owners in the hair styling profession,
because you have obligations. Yeah.
And there was no way that you could do that during COVID.
Yeah. Luckily, I had reserves. I had enough things, had enough income coming in from the booth renters, and the way everything was structured, though I was losing about $1,000 a month, it was still okay. But it got to the point I did need to sell the business. But ironically, you don't get much for selling your business. You get money for selling your real estate. And the real estate was at an apex. So it worked out well. It enabled me to pay both mortgages, the mortgage on the shop and the mortgage over here, plus additional monies to, maintain things, upgrades, that type of thing.
Now, what would you say was the most rewarding thing about your profession?
Just the connection you make with people. I genuinely like people. One of the things that I often found sad is that when you have a customer and they're not your customer anymore, that doesn't mean you don't like them, So I'd say, hey, how's it going? And they would just kind of like shun you. And it's like, no, I'm earnest about my expression, and it's too bad that a person has to feel that way, but that's just where they're at, so it's okay. No, but it was a people business, just like the profession you had. It was a people business, Oh, you would have been proud when I brought in the information for my parents and getting qualified for benefits and stuff like that. I'd come in with crates. And the supervisor or whoever I was with, they would ask me for something, and I would open, crate number 2, pull out the file, and they say, whoa, you're really organized, Mr. And I said, you bet I am. Because the thing is, if you don't do your due diligence, it just slows down everything. And it's hard enough even when you get it right, So, yeah, I had a good time with that.
Yeah, but I would have to say, I can remember once when I made a decision to change hairdressers, I felt guilty. I felt like I was breaking up with them.
Right.
And so I can understand, from the client's perspective, what you relate, that you see them on the street and it's like, oh no.
Yeah. Well, the way I would talk, because I'd have a lot of conversations with other hairdressers, and I says, the only time the client is your client is when they're sitting in your chair. Outside of that, it's a free market.
And what would you say was the biggest challenge of your profession?
Learning how to be a better business person. Because I didn't have any formal education as a business person. When somebody comes in and they want to wear a hairdresser and this and that, I would often tell them, get some business background, know how to manage your money, understand the conversations that a good employer will have with you if you. So as good as I understood things, I think I could have done better. So I think that was probably something that at the get-go, instead of putting in your work and then having fun, put in your work and go back to school, get an associate's degree, or go to a junior college, get a background. Though you get it in the long term, but the thing is, it's not the right way to do it. If you're going to start off at the starting line, you want to have all your horses lined up.
Sure. So I understand in addition to running your business as a hairdresser, you had some sidelines associated as well.
Well, we did put on one show at the Cascades when Mr. Truman owned it. And we did business with 5 or 6 different retailers. We rented the staging from a theatrical company, had a pianist, had a fashion designer help me. We had professional models teaching our clients because we do the hair and stuff of that nature. Wine, cheese, the whole 9 yards. All tickets were $3, of course. Lost my shirt, but it was a hell of a production, full house. It was a lot of fun. So every once in a while you get out of your way and you do something like that.
Because I think that I had seen that you also did some fashion seminars, or maybe that's what this was too.
Well, this wasn't a seminar. This was just advertising your business and also advertising, the retail industry, their clothing and stuff like that. So it was a nice collaboration of a lot of people. Going to shows for technical training, that's a different category. Some shows are for fluff to get ideas in your mind. Others are more technically designed. Like when I owned the business, Debbi was in the corporation because the corporation needed a secretary per se. So she was allowed to go to these functions. Of course, she didn't really participate in the business, so it was really cute. A lot of young hairdressers would approach her and ask her all these questions. She'd be all flustered, It was really kind of cute. Just, no, it's him, But yeah, it's an interesting business. And then when my brother was going to Vegas, I threw him a surprise party at the Rochambeau, and we did a roast, and we had 10 or 11 different people roasting him. We had a slideshow, which had one of the shots was his barbershop in Vietnam, and yeah, that was a real good. That was a fundraiser. I raised a lot of money for him. We had a big house, had a band. Ricky Bidet's band was there. No, we had a real good time. So,
did he stay in the business too?
When he went to Las Vegas, he didn't. He didn't do it anymore. Yeah, no, he needed a change.
What was that like to have, a family business that you all work together like that?
Well, we're all independent, so it wasn't hard to work there because we had our own determinations, our own ideas, our own disciplines, and so no, it wasn't hard. I didn't have a hard time living with my brother. I lived with him for a number of years. I didn't have a difficult time working with my father. No, it was fine. I look back on it fondly. It was okay.
Because that's interesting, especially when again, as an outsider, when I think about this, your father must have been pretty open-minded, again, going from a classical barbershop and then being open to...
He was very progressive. No, he was very progressive. No, my dad was quite the guy. So...
yeah, I saw that he won an award for the Maine Barber of the Year, and he was also, and I think you were as well, very active in the union for your profession. Yeah.
Well, we probably were in the shadow of my father, but we're active, sure.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying, they were good role models.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, no, it was nice to have,
So a couple of questions to wrap this up. One that I often ask is, what is something you'd want to make sure that people take away from your story? What is the lesson, so to speak?
Don't be afraid to live. Try things. Failure isn't really failure, but you got to measure things too. You know, if you think you're going to fail at something, you're probably encouraging that to happen. But you know, you have to weigh out the advantages and the disadvantages of taking chances, but you still have to participate in life. So take measured chances and, you know, enjoy the experience of that action. You know, we're here to live. We're here to learn, and you know that's it. It's so important to allow yourself to expand, and it's not easy sometimes because you do have to make concerted efforts to improve yourself, and that can be difficult because it's often easier not to. So if you want to make yourself a better person, a better spirit, a better whatever, you have to apply yourself. Because there are all sorts of things that are going to tell you, no, you can't do it. Whether it's your own engineering or whether it's somebody else's outside influence. But
And I've asked you a lot of questions. Is there anything that you had thought, I want to make sure that I share this, but it didn't happen to come up?
well, it did come up, but the best thing that ever happened to me is my wife.
Well, a lot of people would love to hear that from their other person. That's very powerful.
Yeah. Well, it's one heart, you know, beating simultaneously. No, it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Huh. Well, I can't think of a better note to end this interview on. So, Dawn, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story.
Oh, well, I enjoyed it. Thank you, Nicole. You do a nice job. And by the way, are you going to be interviewed?
Yes, they've already. There's an interview that's already online.
Excellent.
I was really honored. It basically is the immigration story from 3 generations. And that's one of the things that got me to do this work.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for saying that.
Well, you deserve it.
Yeah, thank you.